as the districts are closing out their school year, we're asking them for better numbers on that. And, you know, some may have sent in one paper packet, and do you count that as no communication? It's again, we should be able to get a better number and also identify the households where that has occurred.
We need to do some contract.
Almost the same, yes, sir. Same kind of thing. And districts are working on that.
Who they are.
I think so, and I think going back to your first comment, with all the things that we are doing here, the worst thing that we need to do is lose children during this time. And if we are working on doling out $1.9 billion, we're working with businesses and other folks and employees, that kind of thing. But children, we can't have a lost generation of them because, you know, that goes several times over. And so the question becomes is that once we identify that issue, obviously I'm going to approach a little bit from the rural area now, and I'll wait to get later into your discussion. How are we going to go back and get them? How do we go back and make contact to them? And for those that when we are, you know, I'll also say for many years I filed a bill that would say that you would put hot spots over in locations in Walmart and those kind of things. But candidly, we know that that's not the best use because, I mean, what are we going to make them do? Do their homework in their car? Or if they have a car, if they're going to walk up there and they're going to sit up there on the asphalt and do it on the sidewalk on a parking lot. And so I think that when we're addressing this, it gives us an opportunity to do something real with this, and you'll help us come up with some solutions. That's what we're going to end up doing.
And I'm to that point in my presentation. I'm going to tell you the best way to teach a child to read is to get them sitting down with a great teacher. It's not virtually. That's very difficult to do.
Yes, Senator from Kershaw. Yes. Had the senator from Darling. Did you finish? Yeah.
I want to interrupt because that's the most important comment that's been said all day, and I want us to pause to understand that we can chase rabbits like 5% of the kids that haven't been touched, or people turning in packets, or how's the internet connection. But this is a crisis. This is a crisis that is equal to or larger than the crisis we're facing in our business community. And the focus has to be on, and our efforts have to be on getting these kids in front of teachers so they can be taught. Here's what we know. I don't care how good a distance learning program you have, only a small portion of the children are going to thrive in that setting, and the vast majority are not. And that's what's going on right now. That is not a knock on our teachers or our superintendent. They are doing, I mean, Lord, they're going to people's houses and knocking on doors. That's heroic service, but it's not acceptable or sustainable. We have got to focus on getting these kids, you just said, in front of a teacher in a safe way as soon as possible. And I'm all for making sure we're spending our dollars in a correct manner, whether it's in education or with our business community. But my God, this is a crisis, and if our kids are not in front of a teacher as soon as possible, it will last for generations. So I would encourage this committee to be very focused on, as the senator from Lexington says, the people, and in this case, that's the kids, and making sure they are in front of teachers as soon as possible. And I'm also going to say this as an aside, Ms. Superintendent, I'm not real interested in funding virtual summer camps, okay? You need to tell these districts, including my own, they need to get these kids in the classroom, they need to teach these children, they need to do it in a safe way, and we'll step up to the plate and do what we need to do to make sure it happens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is the reopen South Carolina. It's not specific to that, and that does include making sure that school and our children are safe.
Yes, sir. And that's why the summer program, we've already started it with Read to Succeed. And as you know, the original summer camp is for those children who are not on grade level in third grade. We already know, and you had talked about it in the Senate this past session. Yeah, that's great, but we need second graders, we need first graders, we need kindergartners who are not on grade level participating. So we were already anticipating the numbers to grow in the summer reading camp. We're calling it now an academic recovery camp because we need not just reading, we need math as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the numbers. This has been very difficult to do. People have been working so hard, and while they were struggling just to to get through every day of school, the new normal school, we had to get to a point where we're talking about, okay, what are we going to do for the future? And planning this and not knowing how much money, it's the chicken and the egg, how much money the districts are clamoring, how much money we're going to have. We're 5 weeks away from the start of this, so it's been very difficult. Our first request was very general, 2 districts on a phone call. Tell us how many children you think that you have in your district that would need to go to a summer camp, math, and they're the ones who said we need to do math also, not just reading. And that's where the number that we got first was right at 50, I'll use 50,000, it's 49,000 some odd students that we were told. The discrepancy in the numbers, and it wasn't the best estimate, but when you cut that down now, we went back after Accelerate SC asked us to dig a little deeper, come back with a more detailed plan, which was, they deserved that. We went back to the districts last week and said, give us really numbers of the student count that you believe that you can get there. And so we're at 25,000 K through third graders in reading and math for a 4-week camp with 3.5 hours a day, bus them in, have certified teachers there, an aide in the room, a nurse, a counselor, and you can see the list of the things that are added into that count. The difference in the figure, we changed the ratio. The number almost cut in half, not quite in half, but we cut the ratio from, we were saying in the beginning, 6 to 8 students. We're at 10 to 12 students per teacher, which our teachers say that is doable with an aide in the classroom. The transportation, we've been working with DHEC to get a number, as you know, social distancing on a school bus. School buses hold our largest, about 77 buses. 77 students. If we were to do the actual 6 square feet, we were down to 11 or 12 students. DHEC has come back now and worked with us. They came out and looked at the bus system. We think now we can do probably about half capacity, which would be 35 to 40 students on a bus, which helps us tremendously. The biggest cost of this is teacher cost and transportation costs and the supply costs. Now students aren't going to be sharing books, so we went back and readjusted what we're going to spend supplies. We're at $750 per student now on supplies, so that is the difference, but we believe that we can run a very high-quality program, and I certainly appreciate the recommendation. We can make that work. I've got $50 million here as the request, $50.8 million. If it's 47.9, we will make it work, but somewhere in that ballpark, we're at 1766 per identified student with the calculations that we have done, and that's how we got to the 50.8 million request. Now, I was concerned this weekend when I found out that we had 10 districts that were saying that they would not do a face-to-face program. They would not be able to do that. They would do a virtual program. And again, you heard our conversation just a minute ago. Virtual can be pretty good, but it's still not as effective as one-on-one with a student. I've contacted one of those districts. They've already made adjustments to go from, now we're down to 9 districts. I know several of them have already made tremendous plans, and they're in pretty good shape, I think, in their planning, but I can go back and talk with them. But we have about 5,000 students that would be served because the district is saying they would not offer the face-to-face. They would have to offer virtual. We're 5 weeks away, folks. They got to hire the teachers. They got to hire the nurses. They got to hire the counselors. So these folks can do it. I mean, this is the same group that turned our system overnight into a new system, but it is getting very close. And I have spoken with Senator Shaheen. One of my issues is this is reimbursable. The state, I have to have the flexibility, and I believe I do have that flexibility in the continuing resolution to allow the Department of Education to go ahead and up front with move money in the department so that we could upfront the cost of this for school districts and then be reimbursed. So that's an issue, Chairman, that we will have to.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Lexington.
Superintendent Spearman. And I think you've answered this, but the percentage of these lost students, this is all across the state. It's not in one particular area, it's all across the state. Is that correct? Or is it
The percentage would vary. I think the percentage would vary in some areas.
But these-
I should have recognized, Dr. Kathy Coleman is with me today, and Katie Nilgis. Kathy was very gracious to serve as the chair of the Accelerate Ed Committee and just finished recommendations yesterday for summer school. They're now moving into recommendations for reopening. She also serves on the school board in Saluda. So I asked him, have we lost any kids in Saluda? And she would tell you they know exactly where they live, and they've been out there. We pretty well, it's a very small percentage for us in Saluda, and that may be true in other areas, but it depends on the relationship that the district has with the families.
I mean, the number you said, something like 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's take the low number. Let's take 40,000 children. So let's say we were in school. I mean, we were having face-to-face meeting. I mean, face-to-face, we're just in regular school. We never had COVID. And don't we know how to get in touch with these children if they fell and broke their leg? We know where their parents are, so don't we know how to get in touch with their parents on a normal basis?
I had a teacher call me and said she did that, and with very little, and nothing changed.
I mean, 40,000 kids, that's a lot of children that we don't know. I mean, they just the rapture came down and 40,000 kids just suddenly disappeared. I'm like the biggest advocate you're ever going to find for children. And I can't imagine where 40,000 children we've suddenly just stopped educating them. And now what's going to happen, even if we went back now, they've lost how many ever months. We're not going to be able to catch them up. But
Well, and I think the not heard from question that we posed that day to teachers, I think even that varies from no communication at all, possibly, or every now and then the student might check in.
But this is all grade levels.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
we're talking from
Right.
kindergarten to high school seniors. We're talking about everybody.
Yeah, and I think it varies. I mean, I actually have one of your colleagues in General Assembly who's very worried about her own child who should be participating, and the school's calling her that he's not participating. Okay, so it's a varied level of family situation, reasons, and I can't say it, but I will tell you the schools have tried. And
I'm not blaming it on the school.
No.
I think law enforcement needs to be out looking for 40,000 kids somewhere. I mean,
I would
if we're
say
lost
this
40,000
too,
children.
right? And a teacher explained to me, if there's a student in my class who's falling asleep, not doing his work, I'm going over and standing over him and make sure he gets it done. That's not so easy to do now, and that's it. But there are various reasons, and again, the 40,000 number is very anecdotal. I hope it's not that large. We will know more, and we'll certainly know more because
That was the low end because we said 49. I gave you 9.
No, the 49.
I gave you 9,000 kids. I lowered it.
No, the 49,000, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, I didn't make it clear. The 49,000 number were students in kindergarten through third grade who are not on grade level in reading and math that teachers said, the instructional leaders in those districts said, we could identify that many children. We've narrowed that down and probably gotten a little more real about how many. Now, the question is still, how many are going to show up?
Yeah, what's going to happen when we
many
do
gonna
go back to school? Are kids going to actually come back to school?
Well, we're going to try and build as much trust as we possibly can. There are some, I've been notified by some parents that no, they're going to seek out some type of virtual opportunity if their child has a health reason. But we're trying to make it as set as much confidence as we can by having masks available, by having the buildings clean, by having testing available, by making sure that students stay in their smaller class unit. Meals will be served in the classroom, all the recommendations that Dr. Coleman and the Accelerate Eds group has come up with to make our school buildings as safe as possible. Can we ever make it 100% safe? No. But I want us to get as close to that as we possibly can so parents and grandparents will feel safe to send their students back to us. But it is an issue. It is an issue.
As I go to the senator from Darlington, I hope you're understanding the concern and the importance that we're placing on these students, that we need to have an understanding how we can help those.
Yes, sir.
And we don't want them to be lost.
Absolutely.
Senator from
Thank you,
Darlington.
and I'll be brief, and I want to attest to my partnership with the Senator for the Children, the Senator from Lexington, and what the Senator from Kershaw has said too. And we've been doing these testing things. We employ the National Guard, and we employ other groups to be able to assist, and we're getting buses to go out and to deliver meals. And so what I would ask for is that we can get our superintendent to help us devise a plan of some sort to go and reach out to these children, and for all the resources that we end up having here in our state. One of the most important things we can do is that if we haven't heard from them, let's get a list and let's go find them. And so if that's the case, I mean, I don't want to have a truck of soldiers walking out to end up doing it. But if that's what it takes, that's just what it takes.
Right.
And I think that what happens is that if we put our emphasis in that, I think that before we do all these other things, we need a plan for that and put our resources there.
Well, and again, I know you're not indicating that teachers and our administrators haven't tried, because they have. But I think as soon as we can get those school buses rolling down the road to pick up the students to bring them to school.
Right, but I think that also, let's applaud our teachers, and but we got to know that they exist in order to know that they're missing. And so what we have to find out now is that who are they, and then sometimes the teachers can't get there. And sometimes the school buses are not getting there to all, but we're getting meals delivered, and we got 13 million meals delivered, and we got other resources that we have. And so I'm trying to see how we can help those able teachers and how to end up helping. I mean, if one thing that we could do, Mr. Chairman, is to employ all of those folks to say, who are we missing? I mean, who have you not heard from? I mean, I haven't heard from people in my district say, you know what, school board number one says we got certain students that we haven't missed, that we've been missing, and if they know who that is, I mean, let's get it out there.
Go find them.
Right. And I think that if we could have something here in this committee to end up recovering those, I think that's one of our first missions that we got to end up having.
And I have asked the districts to assist us already with that, to identify those students and let us know who they are.
And then what happens then?
Well, we're going to be sure that I want to get school open as soon as possible so they can come back to school.
Sure. But I think that in the meantime, I think that whenever we get those lists, I think that what we are looking for, and this is not a time for us to just to talk about what's wrong. We just need to help us get a plan that we can go and find them.
Right.
And so once they get them, I don't want it to rest with you. I want you to put the burden on us as we need some resources to end up going out, making certain that we can claim those, because no one from my school district has contacted me and says, we got a certain percentage of students that we are missing.
Yeah.
And so, and it's widely known that we're on this committee trying to open things back up, but I have not heard a word from anybody in my district say that we got students that are missing. Right. But if they're missing and they're not getting their course of study, and I'm in a rural area, and candidly, I'm from the country, so I know where all the backwoods are. Right. And so I think that there's a chance.
That's when we need to partner with social services if we can't. I mean, that's when
the partnerships have to be extensive. Otherwise, then we're going to end up having those problems of that we lose, and then we're going to have more problems with DJJ. We're going to have all kinds of problems whenever we start losing the kids. So partnering with DSS, partnering with anyone else that would end up being a partnership with us. But particularly if the teachers already know and the school districts already know, then that needs to be reported to you. And then we got to get some kind of reporting in to us. And the chairman here will help us put some resources together, and we'll help you go find them.
Thank you. And we are working very closely with, it's a two-way street with Department of Social Services. They need our teachers too. I'm sure they've told you the reports, the reports of child abuse are way down because our teachers are the eyes and ears for those children, and that has been a huge concern for us. We sent a video training out to our teachers, other ways to identify child abuse, particularly those that have that virtual contact. So we did some training while we've been out of school to help with that, but that is a huge concern as well. All righty, I'll move on. The instructional recovery days. And these days are for the regular start of school. I've gotten the question from folks, why did you ask for 6 days? I'll tell you very quickly. I started out asking for 2 weeks, additional 2 weeks. The cost was exorbitant. At that point, we were looking that we may have to do a split schedule, which we are not recommending at this time. And had we had to do a split schedule, my original request to Accelerate SC was actually for 6 days. That was to get each group of students, if we had to split them in half, get everybody in for at least 3 days before school started. That's how I got to 6. The committee recommended 5. We have since met with DHEC, and we believe that we can run a fairly normal schedule with social distancing to the extent possible in a classroom, that we will be able to have close to normal class sizes in the 18, 20 students in a classroom with desks separated as much as possible. So that's where that number, that odd day thing came from. My goal here, folks, get kids back to school as soon as possible. If we could afford 2 weeks, 3 weeks, yeah. But the reality, too, that we're facing, and our good friends down on the coast, we want to see people going on vacation, and we want to see families have a break and go. So I was trying to balance all of that. That's why I am looking now for that extra week, that if we did the 4 weeks of summer school starting July 6th, that would take us through the month of July. Teachers go back to work. Most schools are starting on August the 17th. That's the uniform Monday start date for most students. The teachers are coming in that week of the 10th. If we added a week, that means they're going to come back the week of the 3rd. And we'd have the teachers back and then a full week of students. Now, why not all kids? I asked for K-8. Again, you can see the costs there. All grades per day is $46 million. Grades K through 8 only, $32 million. That's teacher salaries. That's paying for all the teachers. That's paying for the transportation. That's what it costs per day. And I went with K-8 because we were looking at instructional time. Not that the high school kids don't need the emotional, social support. They do. But instructionally, I felt that the high school kids are going to be working in their regular semester grades, a semester of time. They finish those semester work, they're starting new courses, and that's why we chose to go with the K-8 students coming back in, because they are on a scaffold standards. What they learn in the 3rd grade, they got to have to know in the 4th grade and all the way up through the 8th grade. So that's why, if anybody asks you, why did she suggest this, that's how I came to that rationale. If we had the money, yes, we'd bring them all back. There's some issues. Teachers, getting them ready. We have to change contracts to have them work that additional 5 days. But I believe that this is doable. And during that time, what would happen? We could give districts some flexibility. Some have talked to me that they would like to rotate their students in. Maybe the students all don't come every 5 days. Maybe they do split it for that first week, that they come in shifts so that they can learn the protocols. They're going to be doing assessments, academic assessments. We are also going to be doing some social and emotional assessments. Department of Mental Health will be working with us to have. We've got to not only assess where our students are academically, but where are they in dealing with the trauma that many of them have been through. So those 5 days would be used for those type of activities for kindergarten through 8th grade students. And the cost of that for 5 days to do K-8 is $160 million.
Senator from Darlington.
So I'm zoning in and trying to picture this whole thing now. So let me get this right. Did I just hear you say it's optional for the districts to do the 5 days early?
I have had that discussion with one or two superintendents, and I think overwhelmingly they are in support of coming back and doing this. But to be totally honest with you, yes, I've had a couple to say, is that optional? And I've said, if you don't want to take the money, yes, it could be optional, but I can go on your direction on that.
So then, what? Isn't it such that it could be mandated?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so our chairman here is taking the directions, and we want to open South Carolina back up, but we are still trying to be realistic. Mm-hmm. And with all the science that I've been hearing is that this is a little bit of a moving target, if you will. And so, I was looking at some little graphs the other day, yesterday I think it was, and it says South Carolina is basically steady as it relates to the number of cases. So my concern is that when we start doing something now going forward, what happens if our numbers vacillate some, or if the virus that we think may become dormant, may become not dormant is a bad word, may hopefully lessen if it starts to spike back up, and we're still having this optional thing, and we're still talking about what the senator from Lexington saying is the children, then it would seem to me that it would make sense for the committee to consider and for our superintendent to sort of think about mandating it for K through 8,
Yes,
which
sir.
is a critical time.
Yes, sir. That can be done, but you asked. I'll be honest
So
with you.
I
But
don't
again,
want
I want you to know overwhelmingly there is support to do this. But I have had
And
a few
and so, and
to
so,
ask: is it mandatory?
And so, this is a hard thing. It's not supposed to be easy, and I don't want some superintendent in some district convincing his board to say, well, we're just going to end up doing, and no disrespect to them, they are great folks. We're only going to end up doing it, we're not going to adhere to this, we're going to do 5 days, whatever. I think the state of South Carolina needs to speak on this. And I think that whenever we do, I think the state of South Carolina needs to say that we're going to come in, we come in 5 days early. I mean, my children are going to school. I got a call from president of school not too long ago. Colleges are trying to open a little early. They're closing, not going out for a fall break. I think that we can come in as a committee if it's your thought as well, and so we can help embolden you to say the committee is telling me that we want to end up coming back, mandating that. If you think that's a good idea, because we have to rely upon you. But I think it's a good idea.
I think students need to be there. If
Well, there you
I
go.
were the superintendent of each district, I would do it for everybody.
But that voice has been heard. You're our leader in education, and I think that you should make that recommendation to us. And I think committee, I think that we should listen to it and follow it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Senator from Clarendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, I agree with Senator Malloy on that. But, Mona, I was just wondering, I don't want to assume the few school districts who may not want to do this or may want it to be optional, are they giving you reasons why they would not want to have these extra 5 days? I know you have some concerns. There are some concerns?
Well, I'm getting questions. Why just K-8? Why not everyone? Some, and to be honest with you, there is almost a divide there on when we should start. Is it safest to start early, or should we wait and let the virus hopefully die down and start later after Labor Day? So that is a discussion going on. I can't answer, I can't look in the crystal ball and say which is the best option. I just know you got to pick one of them and try to go with it. But we do have some who are asking that and now, school districts do have the flexibility for their start time up. Students can't start before that third Monday, and they have to start by Labor Day. So there are some who are with their boards thinking that it would be a better idea to wait. On that, I'm okay with them still having that flexibility, but I can go at your direction because they do have some flexibility. You've got the beach area, Ori, county who always likes to push that start date back, and I would ask you to still give them that flexibility to begin, but I support fully mandating the 5 days.
The extra 5 days.
Yes, sir.
I think that would be the question from that standpoint. Okay.
Yes, sir. So you can look over, and Mr. Burns and Senator Ryberg have already covered. They've supported us with the food cost, the technology reimbursements. They went a little different direction with that, and I certainly support what they have done. And I do want to talk just a minute because they have had some very good questions, and I want to be sure that you understand this, because we as an agency, the U.S. Department of Education, receive a CARES relief fund as well. And there's $216 million that will be coming to the Department of Education. And that funding has a little different strings attached to it than does the $1.9 billion. It is not reimbursable. It can be reimbursable, or it can be spent on things as they purchase them. The time frame is much different. The CARES Act fund of Accelerate SC has to be spent by the end of December of this year. This funding actually goes through into September of 21. They can go into next year. The districts have 12 categories, and you have that in your materials. I believe it's in a separate, not in this. Well, wait a minute. No, it is in this. It is in this. Yeah, here we go. It's called the ESSER, ESSER funds. There are 12 different categories, very broad, that this money can be spent. We sent out today, we've just been getting all the final guidance. We sent out today guidance to the districts. They already knew about these 12 pots. It goes on to the next page. And as you can see, it's very broad. Any kind of COVID impact, cleaning, mental health supports, other activities to ensure continuity. Senator Ryberg asked me, well, why aren't they spending their money on summer learning? Actually, they can. It is not enough funding, though, to fully fund with all the other things that they have that they can do. And I do not have the authority to direct the district that they have to spend their money in a certain way. It's very clear. We've asked that question of the U.S. Department of Education. This is funding. We keep 10% of it at the department. We, too, believe that it needs to be managed by a grant manager. We are hiring a person to oversee the management of these funds to be sure that it's spent wisely, accurately, and hopefully not duplicative. But I will tell you, one of the sticking points here that I think has raised some eyebrows, but it's true, number 12 allows districts to use this funding on other activities to ensure continuity of education and employment, and the U.S. Secretary of Education actually advised them not to spend all of your money in the first month or two, to really plan and be thoughtful about how you may have to use your money to keep teachers employed with the impact of COVID-19 over the next year and a half. So districts have a lot of flexibility. We are putting the application up. Hopefully it will go up Monday. We're beta testing that this week, Thursday and Friday. It should go out to districts the first of next week. In that application, they have to show us their priority. They have to tell us why they're spending their money, give us a plan for how they're spending their money. They have to give quarterly reports. We will be monitoring that, auditing that spending over the next year and a half as they expend those funds. So they do have funding available. It's $194 million. You have a list if you want to look at your district. I think it's in a separate document, Katie, that I hope you have at your desk. Yes, sir. It's on another.
It's on this white page here.
It's this sheet here. It ranges anywhere from a couple $100,000. I think Turbyville, some of our smallest districts, get around $350,000. I know Florence District 4 is one of our smallest districts. They get $560,000 up to Greenville is 19 million.
Is it impacted by the number of students as part
It's
of that
based
formula?
on Title I poverty. It was allocated by a Title I formula. It can be spent on all students, but the formula that it was allocated out is on a Title I formula. Excuse me, I said September of 2021. They actually have until September of 22.
2022.
2022, yes, sir, I said that incorrectly. So they've got a while to come up with their plan. Now, some of them, it can pay for things that a lot of them had to buy extra computers. They've already bought equipment, and they may want to pay for that. So in the month of June, if they turn this around really fast, they can use it to pay for some expenses that they've had in this fiscal year.
Okay. So are you aware of other opportunities for other funding outside of what you identified at
there are
this
a
point?
couple. One that we are applying for, we as a state, we're not in the first priority bracket, but we're close to the first. We're in the second priority to apply for a $15 million grant in technology. And we would use it to expand if funded. We are applying for it, and we are asking so that we can expand our virtual SC, which is the virtual program. We serve about 34,000 students in South Carolina through the Department of Education. We want to expand our content down into elementary so that if this does happen again, that we'll have more content available, because it's been typically middle school, mostly high school. It's free to all students in South Carolina, not just public school students, but private school students and homeschool students. So we think that would really be a great service. So that's what we're applying. Don't know yet that we'll be awarded that grant, but that's $15 million.
Okay. Other than that, is there anything else
Katie, is there anything I'm forgetting?
at this time?
Well, and you know about the gears.
Yes, yes.
And we're
Senator
working with the governor's office on establishing the criteria, which districts, and that funding, I will say, is really priority does go to these school districts that have been most impacted by COVID-19. It's not just everybody qualifies for it. I guess they could, but for sure, the priority has to go to those areas, and we're working with Ms. Barton in the governor's office on establishing that criteria.
Okay. And before we conclude, there may be other question, but I want to go back to, does that kind of
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I
could talk a long time, but y'all ask
on the hot spots or the broadband, not the 80 million, the 20 million, y'all would use that when you, I know we talked about buses, but
Yes, sir.
This would go further than that, it's my understanding.
Right,
Or
right.
am
The
I correct, into the homes, would be provided into the homes of individuals?
I think so. And that's not just for education. I mean, you think about it, being able to access Wi-Fi helps.
Health and
health,
education, yeah.
telehealth,
Economic development,
economic development, getting a job, applying for your disability.
But it's not just, I didn't want us to leave the impression that was just school buses and things of that nature,
right.
that it is.
And I
other
would have
things
to
that-
rely, I've been meeting over this before, but a lot, over the last 10 weeks with the telecommunications folks, particularly telephone company folks, providers, many of whom, Senator Ryberg said that, they've invested their own funding. You look at, and one in particular, I was not aware, look at the map and see how well Colleton County, which is a very rural area, their little public telephone company down there has put a lot of their own funding into getting out into the community. You can see their Wi-Fi coverage goes right up the main highway into Allendale. Now, it doesn't branch out because that's when it gets really expensive. But they've done a great job. Comporium has done, just many of the providers, they've given free or discounted, for the last couple of months. They've been doing a lot. Electric Cooperative. I'm served by my electric cooperative, Mid-Carolina, who came out. I would not have been able to work, I'm telling you, like I've worked, had they not done what they've done over the last year and a half. So I'm a beneficiary of that, but I'm not an expert. I think we turn this to those experts who are, I understand, working feverishly to get some kind of plan in place, and we get the low-hanging fruit. That first step, and I think the first step then is this getting those Wi-Fi's placed, maybe putting some on towers, whatever, that can expand the capacity.
Well,
areas.
and you took the, my next point was obviously we've got a lot of folks that have been doing a lot, especially during this period of time, of making sure that the students have been taken care of. They've stepped up. Private investment has gotten us to where we are to this point, but there's a lot more business, a lot of opportunities. There's enough opportunity for everybody to be at the table and to make South Carolina connected.
Yes, sir.
And that's the goal I think that we all share, is that we want all regions of the state of South Carolina
Well,
connected as a part of critical infrastructure for
It
the
is
future of this
critical.
great state.
And I know you live up in a rural area. I compare it back. I heard my daddy talk a lot about it when they turned on that first light bulb out 10 miles outside of Saluda when the co-ops came in. And technology now is the same thing as electricity was to the rural areas. They will totally dry up if we don't provide them this access. And we've got really, there's a lot of access out there, but it's getting it into the home, the affordability, and then getting it into the home. So
And that is another component, is the affordability that we have to be aware of. Are there any other questions? If not, thank you. Well, wait a minute now.
Mr. Chairman, Molly, I've got a question.
Well, wait.
Okay.
You were presenter today, Senator.
we served on the same, we were on the same delegation there for about a half a year before we redrew lines. I had the Monetta precinct of Aiken County, and I got the privilege
We'll
to serve.
give him the privilege of one question.
Actually, I had the opportunity to spend Memorial Day weekend in Greenville, South Carolina, where my 7 grandchildren
Yes.
reside. And some of the comments that were made by the legislators today, I mean, I was already fully engrossed in this problem and this whole situation. But words like crisis, lost 40,000, some of those comments make me want to say or ask this question at this time. When I was in Greenville, my youngest granddaughter said that she was going to have the same teacher again this year. She goes to Summit Elementary, and so I said, "Well, that's great." I said, "Because that teacher you had before, you left, and many of those students, of course, that was the only connection they had to the education, and so you will renew with them. You don't start with the new rules about where you put the homework, where you do this, where you do that, where you keep your books. It's all pre-learned because you've already had that teacher." Have you looked at looping? And are you going to make it mandatory? Because it seems to me putting them in front of people face to face, like Senator Shaheen talked about, is absolutely critical. And I just hope that you're given full consideration to looping, and not on a voluntary basis, but just on a required basis across South Carolina. And what that is you have the same teacher that's teaching that taught the 2-year or the second graders last year will teach that same student, the 3rd grader, this year. And it's only effective probably in K through 5, okay? But to me, it's almost free compared to the monies that we're talking about here. But if we miss an opportunity like that, I think we're missing an opportunity to bring these kids back quicker.
I appreciate.
Anyway,
yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
No, sir. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That was more-
I'm
No, I
glad
asked
you
the
liked
question.
it.
Was
Did
he
you know?
I asked the question if
Did
she
you
was
know?
looking at looping, and she
That's
said
right.
yes.
Yes.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think she'll follow
We'll talk
up.
about the high school league later.
All right, we need to.
I'm
let's get
glad
back
you
to-
endorse it because I agree, and it is. We've already discussed it. They've not finished their report. My schools in Saluda do it. I think it's so smart, and even smarter in this situation that we're in. So I'm glad you like it, and
We appreciate the former senator, endorsing that as well. So we'll stand adjourned, and we got another meeting after that. And our next meeting will be next Tuesday, 10 a.m. in this room.
parameter Senator from Darlington that you talked about during the meeting that just adjourned in terms of the number of days that we're going to be in session, the possible necessity of something having to go through the committee process, and just in general, the difficulty of getting something tremendously substantive passed in a very telescopic period of time. What's in your packet, gentlemen, is proposed legislation. It is omnibus in nature. It is broad in nature. It is meant to touch upon and identify all of the potential issues. And then you've also got in your packet some letters from the Chamber of Commerce, the Manufacturers Alliance, the Hospital Association, the Medical Association, Retail Association, National Federation of Independent Businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, and then a State Attorney General's letter to Congress. But briefly stated, here's the issue. Many businesses that are now reopening. What they've learned is that liability insurance is not available in regard to civil actions against establishments alleging that somebody contracted the virus on their premises. And I know from personal experience that a lot of property owners associations, for instance, in my district on Hilton Head, even though the governor's executive order in regard to pools, for instance, has been lifted, they are not allowing access to those pools because the liability insurance doesn't cover claims that might be made of somebody who contracted the virus. You've also got concerns from frontline workers such as doctors, nurse practitioners, physicians assistants, different categories of individuals who are desirous of some sort of protection from civil liability. I was having a conversation with Senator from Kershaw just a few minutes ago, and he made a good point about how you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here either. I mean, what you want to do is you want to encourage businesses and you want to go ahead and have a predictable, stable legal environment. But by the same token, you don't want to create the impression that in the public that businesses can do whatever they want to and they're not going to be held liable for negligence. So, but I think that there is a middle ground that we can strike here. The idea being that for a temporary period of time, and that's the first thing I would mention, is that it would sunset by a given date. I'll just say December 31 for sake of argument. Secondly, that in order for a business or an enterprise to avail itself of what's essentially a safe harbor from civil liability for COVID-19 related lawsuits, they would have to demonstrate compliance or discharge with certain safety or best practice protocols. So there would have to be some discussion about what those protocols would be. And how businesses would evidence that they've discharged them. And then we'd have to have some discussion in regard to the various stakeholder groups, how they feel about this, what's possible. And what I said earlier, I'll say it again. This bill only gets done unless it's a consensus bill. If there is a substantial stakeholder out there that has a serious objection, there's just not going to be the time for us to do something given the time that's needed. I mean, it needs to be done quickly in order to provide the reassurances. It's not something that if it bleeds over into the fall, I think the social utility of it goes away. So the purpose of this meeting is, one, just sort of like to give a broad overview of the issue. Two, to give you these materials so you'd have a chance to look at them. I don't pretend to believe that you had a chance in the last 24 hours to look at all this. But then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, to get a general sense, because we got a pretty good cross-section of the Senate in here, a general sense of what is doable and what is not doable, so we don't waste our time on something that is clearly undoable, and we can focus our attention on the things that can be accomplished. So with that by way of background, I'll yield to my friend, Senator from Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your practical approach to problems, which I will remark over the last 3 years, I've noticed you developed to a very good point. But I really do appreciate it. It's how I try to approach things, and I appreciate that approach on this committee. So let me just give you my very broad observations because you asked for them. Sure. Number one, what I said to the senator a little while ago was, it struck me as the mayor was talking about that the number one thing we need to do is instill confidence in people, that one of the number one things we could do to make people not confident is to say a business can negligently injure you and they will face no repercussions. Okay, I mean, like, who's going to want to go eat in a restaurant knowing that they have immunity granted by us to negligently injure you severely, and you're going to show up and go eat a meal? Okay, so we, in my mind, again broadly, we don't want to create a lack of confidence by telling people that they have no right to be protected against negligent conduct toward them. I mean, that just inherently makes people have no confidence. So we clearly don't want to do that. So I think the narrower, my broad approach here or thoughts is, the narrower you look, the better, number one. And number two, the third thing I'll say is this, and I know this is legal, but we're talking about legal, okay? If somebody is following the best practices, they're not negligent. That's what negligence is, not following the best practices. So that's already the standard, okay? If you are following the best practices, you are following what's called the standard of care. And in civil liability, if you're following the standard of care, you're not negligent, okay? So in my mind, if we want to establish what the best practices are so that businesses will then know to adhere to them, to protect themselves, it makes sense to me. If there's some confusion in the world about what the best practices are, that to me if we want to try to build some stability, that to me seems like what we should be talking about. I'm certainly not going to support some, blanket immunity for people to injure other people in negligent conduct. So anyway, that's just some broad kind of concepts I throw out there for consideration.
Senator from Darlington.
Belabor it either. I think that we just have to be careful that we send the right message if we're trying to do this. Is that that there's no group that's more important than the other. We got nurses and caregivers and patients and other folks that need to be protected. We can't get into an issue where we have a race to the bottom, where we are having those individuals that may be the victims of some conduct, and someone is immunized in that situation. And I think that as we move forward, I applaud too. You and I had some great conversations about it. Your approach, I think, is a practical and pragmatic approach to try to see if there is a solution. So I'm happy to end up working with you to try to see if there is something that we can end up taking a look at that would be best for all of South Carolina. I do have concerns about the window, and so if there's a sunset date, that what happens the day before, the day after, then who is beneficiary of it, and particularly when we have a virus that's out there that's on a sliding scale, it could be up and down. I do want us to end up taking a chance, though, if you will, is that it's been brought to my attention on something, since this is more of a legal approach, that when we were talking about police officers and the workers' comp and other responders, that what we did was say that they were subject to the act, and say that they have that would be an exclusive remedy. And so there's been a concern brought by some groups that say that that in the code that they say that infectious diseases are not subject to the remedy. So we got a little conflict. So we may need to draft a little language somewhere along the line to end up adding that as we continue to end up trying to protect those folks that are in different positions.
Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would echo everybody's thoughts on this, and I appreciate your approach. I think the big thing is it's not just businesses. It's like you said, it's HOAs, POAs, it's churches, and every board member that sits on those. It's I've been reading insurance article after article on these things, and it's really directors and officers that's going to be exposed. And the thing that's scary to me is the first thing that was passed by Congress was a Federal Employment Act that basically told somebody with one employee that if their child was home from school, they had to pay them for 2 weeks. Well, I can assure you there's not many 1 and 2 employee businesses that can support that. And so it opened up the door, I think, on a lot of people that may have never been subject or thought they were subject to HR laws and rules. And that's my concern. A lot of this is the small business getting tied up in things that they had no idea that even existed. So
Let me ask this. If we could, for purposes of our work, use the draft legislation as a point of departure in our discussions, and between now and when we meet on June 2nd, that's our next meeting, right? June 2nd. Maybe we could meet after that and start checking those sections that are doable and excising sections that are not doable, and try to whittle it down to something that we believe is worth consideration. Does that sound like a good work schedule? Senator Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I am totally fine with the work schedule. I haven't brought you anything else, so I'm not going to say we can't work off of this work product because I haven't brought anything to the table. But I do want to say that I really don't think I like this model that I'm looking at. I've only quickly reviewed it.
Okay.
But it seems to incorporate like national stuff, and it's really broad. So I may seek from, I know probably nobody's watching this. Is this meeting even televised? Whatever. Anyway, anybody who's interested in this, like, I would love for you to ask for them to send us proposed.
And that's what I meant by point of departure. I mean, I mean, don't be wed to this, but maybe as something to pivot around. And then there may be sections of it that you can use if massaged. There may be other sections that just simply are beyond.
Let me say, the only reason I say it that way is, you brought up the HOA and the pools, okay? There may be some really specific things that are crying out for some guidance. I think that's more likely to occur than some blanket everybody in the state of South Carolina who does what some random agency in Washington, D.C. is protected. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. I mean, you correct me if
No, it's
wrong.
fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. Okay, so we will go ahead and have our next meeting immediately upon adjournment of next Tuesday's meeting of the full committee. And at that point in time, anybody can bring forward work product they think is more appropriate to the task at hand, or if you feel like going through the draft that's here and pointing out things that are acceptable, that's fine too.
do you see us taking testimony next Tuesday, or?
Would you all find that helpful if we had testimony from I hate to say from both sides, but from those that have concerns as opposed to those that are proponents?
So I think that we've been. This is an issue that is like when my dad used to tell me to take out the garbage, and you pause, and he said, "Right now." That's what it meant. And so this is a right now issue. I think that if we start taking testimony, I think that we know that there's a division, and I don't think that anyone will add to it. I think that if you would ask Mr. Chair to say if there's, and there are people that are starting to contact us now, if there is someone that has language that they would like to end up giving it, they will end up giving it to you.
Yeah.
They've been sending it to us. I mean, the three of us are lawyers. He's been in insurance for a long time. We know the issue. We just got to see whether or not it's something that we can end up.
So we'll receive maybe written testimony or written submissions.
I would solicit, I agree with Senator from Darling, but I'd solicit written comment.
Okay.
And then I would invite people to be here because we may have questions. But I don't need to hear the same 5 groups say the same 5 things.
Okay. Well, that's what we'll do then. All right, we'll stand adjourned until next Tuesday. Thank you, guys.